So you're doing the Centipedes and Millipedes task. And for those of you that are curious and do a bit of review with your maths and look through the textbook from now and again, you know, like you've been told, you can do some homework off your own back from the book. You may well have spotted this task in the book. Okay, but I printed it off. I've got the sheets I'm going to give you in a sec. All right, but I want to make one thing clear. Right, the task itself, you're going to get in a sec. I'm not giving it to you because some people will just try and do it instead of listening to what I'm talking about. All right, we all know who I'm talking about. All right, so there is this task. It won't take, well, to be honest, 3 lessons is more than enough time. So really, you won't need to do any homework unless you feel you really need to. You know, maybe you got slightly off time. Maybe one thing was a little bit harder in class than you thought. So you might, I'm going to do a little bit at home, but you shouldn't need to do much at home. Definitely shouldn't need to do 8 hours of work over the weekend, for instance. But I will make one thing clear. It is a B, C, and D, right? And your ATL of organisation and time management. You'll see all of this when I give you the paper close. Yeah. It's more of a project type thing, yeah. But and that's I guess what I'm leading to. Right, is the fact that there's a BCD, which means investigating patterns. C is communication, and D is applying maths in real life. If you're going to get, yeah, does it make sense? So once I give it out, we'll go through the questions one by one, just so I can point out to you where each criterion needs to be addressed. All right? You may well feel you want to make some notes at that point to say, oh, this question, I need to remember to do this. I did exactly the same thing last year with the M1s, and the number of students that lost the marks for criterion B and D because they just didn't do what I asked them to do. I didn't tell them what, they didn't write it down, or they just didn't do it. Right? So I'm pre-warning you that. If you do not do what I advise you to do now in this video, right, you will get a 0 for one or more of the 3 criteria. Right? That's because there's only a small part of it that is criterion D. Therefore, if you don't do that, you've not addressed any of criterion D. Does that make sense? All right. The assessed ATL is your organisation and management. Again, you can read it when I give it to you. How did you use your class and home time? Did you allow enough time to produce an excellent piece of work? Did you get your work checked for how it reads before you submitted it? Did you submit a finished piece of work on time? All right, sorry, I don't know why that comes up. But, so, when I look at your ATL, or when you think about it, that's what we're talking about, your organisation and time management. Now, how am I going to really look at that? Well, this page I've just given you is a planning sheet. All right? So when I give you your paper in a sec, the first thing we're going to do is talk through it and talk through the questions and what's aimed at for each one. The second thing you do before you get on with it, you're going to make a plan of what you're going to do in each lesson. All right? Now you might, I'm not going to mark it down if you don't stick exactly to it. All right? But I guess the worst case scenario is you don't get to the end of it within 3 lessons. Because like I said, there is more than enough time to finish this in, well, even 2.5 lessons, because I'm talking through this one. So 2 lessons of work thoroughly, and then any homework time you think there's plenty of time so you can split that. And yes, you will be submitting this with it used with your piece of work. Don't lose it. Right. I have just put the 2 documents just to show you that on Teams I have just created a new channel. I just thought it might be worthwhile. Sorry. Number 6, assessment. Why won't that open up? And I have put, here are the electronic copies, those 2 things. All right? So what does that mean? If you lose it, or you want to do some work at home and you've forgotten to bring it home, so you haven't, then you've got a copy that you can refer to. You'll probably then have to fill in your original copy. Yeah.
We have 3 days.
So you have today, you have, what did I say, Monday's lesson and Wednesday's lesson. You submit at the end of the lesson on Wednesday, not Wednesday evening, end of lesson on Wednesday. So just before recess. What that means is if you need a bit more wiggle room, you've got some recess. You can, just. Now, just to address the extra time thing of a project like this, extra time is to allow some students that need to work a bit slower some extra time to complete it. So what I'm saying very clearly is 3 lessons or even 2.5 is more than enough time without doing any homework. So if you are someone that works a bit slower, you need to factor in, you probably have to do a bit of homework time, all right? Rather than me extend this for another entire day for you, because that will drag into other things. You need to organise and go, well, this will be easily finished in 2 lessons in class, but maybe I need to do a bit more homework, rather than lose your lunchtime to get extra time or something like that. Does that make sense for anyone that's involved in that? Yeah? If you lose it and you don't hand it in on time on Wednesday, that's it, you don't get to submit. All right? So be on it. Organisation is key. All right, so that's just making a couple of things clear. Any particular questions regarding that so far? No more. All right, let me hand out. All right, so let's have a look. So I'm going to be saying, right, I'm going to give you some advice, but I'm going to do it verbally. It is on video. You've got to write these notes. I'm not doing the notes for you. You're going to write these notes. You can do it in your books. That works as well. Absolutely, whatever works for you. Back of the planning sheet or in your book is absolutely fine. Now, we've got a centipede. The legs and its body follow a pattern. All right? This is where you start just identifying what the pattern is. This is the basics of Criterion B. Right? You have to complete it. Early ones are really quite simple, quite easy. Complete the table for the number of legs. Right? This is where you are trying to spot the pattern and make links between the number of body segments and the number of legs. Right? I don't want any answers at this stage. You're going to be working on your own, not together, on your own to come up with these. All right. Now, here's where we get to the real Criterion B stuff, which is explain the pattern in words. In words. So communication, that's your Criterion C. I think, have I... Do I need to make that difference? Maybe I need to sit down here a bit. Right. I think I did expand this on yours, no? As possible. Does it say on yours as possible? No. No? It's all right. I thought I'd done it. Now, communication. Be succinct. Use the correct vocabulary. Don't want massive, long essays. But how can you calculate the number of legs if you know how many body segments? Again, I don't want the answers. All right. But this, write your rule as an algebraic equation. This is where we start generalizing. This is where the Criterion B stuff and Criterion C is really coming into play. Yeah? If you do not manage to write an equation that links, then obviously you're not going to be getting a very good score for Criterion B, but also you're going to miss the chance of communication using algebra. Now, don't forget with this question, algebra has correct spelling, doesn't it?
Not 2 times n, it's 2n.
All right, it has correct spelling. Use it, otherwise you will lose communication points. So maybe that's a note for you to think specifically there. All right, it does say don't write too many words, because that's the whole point of that bit, not too many words. This is the Criterion B. Use your rule. Your rule. Right? Show you're working every step. Be neat and tidy and make it clear. Communication as well as Criterion B.
And at the end of it, kind of like Criterion B doesn't make sense.
Not yet. Not yet. Wait and see. All right? You've got to show that you can use your rule, your algebra from the previous bit to do this. Now, using your rule, determine how many body segments there would be if it had 58 rows. Again, show every step. Show you're working. Neat and tidy. Not all over the page, randomly. I will mark you massively down for communication if you do that.
So when it says segment, does it include the head? No, it doesn't. So the first one has.
Right, I don't want answers. Not yet. You can ask me a question in a minute. Now, here's where Charlie's jumping in. Explain the degree of accuracy of your answers in part E and F and describe whether or not your answers in E and F make sense. It says keep your answers short and to the point, no need to write an essay. But this is Criterion D, right? If you don't answer this question, you can't get any marks for Criterion D. Simple as that. All right? Do we all know what degree of accuracy means? Remember, we're dealing with the number of legs. That's all I'm going to say. It's all about the number of legs and the number of body segments. Think about what that has to be. All right? Now, this is important. So the second section is about millipedes, and it basically goes through the same process, but there's a slight change. Because a millipede is slightly different to a centipede. Charlie, keep it. All right? Don't tell us any answers. This was a real separator last year between the M1s, between the ones that spotted it and the ones that didn't. I did write, right, in here, I think I added to it, unless it didn't happen, I put that the head and final segment count as segments. All right? I thought I'd change this copy, but obviously not. But you've got to go through the same process again. All right? But you'll notice what's not there are these little boxes. Okay? So that means if you are unsure about, oh, here you go. So if you're unsure, refer back to the boxes like don't write an essay, make sure you talk about it. This is just the next step. And again, it says the head and last body segment should be included in that number. All right? Write your rule as an algebraic fraction. Again, use correct algebra. If you don't, your communication and your generalization is wrong. Okay? Using your rule, this is the important bit. Right? Using your rule, determine that. And again, does your answer make sense? Now, so you've got the consequences of that is there are only 2 questions, and they're basically about the same thing for Criterion D. You see that? So that same question appears in both sections. In both sections, you've got the fill the table, use your answer to work out another one, use your answer to work out segments. It must be clear that you have used your rule. All right? If your rule is wrong and you use something else to get the correct answer, I'm afraid you've not done what needs to happen. If your rule is wrong and you use it and work out the wrong answer, I would expect you to identify I've done something wrong. Does that make it clear? So does my answer make sense? Have I got the correct degree of accuracy? You've got 2 chances only to get a mark for Criterion D. And last year, a number of people just went, I don't really understand that now, I'm just not going to do it. And therefore, they had to get 0s for Criterion D. All right? There's a bit of pressure. They're not hard questions. We know what we mean by degree of accuracy and also whether it makes sense. Come and speak to me if you don't really know at some point when you get there. But it's super important. Seems like a really short, quick task, but get it right. I'm also going to be a little bit picky on how good your drawings of centipedes and millipedes are. If it's not clearly an extension of the pattern that they've drawn, I mean, it doesn't have to be amazing, you have to draw the Mona Lisa of millipedes or anything like that, but it needs to be clear that it is a progression of the same thing. And communication, guys, everything on your whole thing needs to be neat and tidy. Can I suggest that you write out your answers on your book before you transfer them to the paper, just in case you make mistakes? Well, the whole thing, I would do it in your maths book and then transfer your final answers to this. Any final questions? Hang on.
If your drawing doesn't look good, but you can still...
As long as I understand it's the pattern, yes. But you don't have to be an amazing artist. But if it doesn't look like it's supposed to, if the legs are on the wrong segment and things like that, that does matter. If there's no head or final body segment, and there should be, that does matter. Some people were getting lazy and not putting the heads on last year. So if you do that this year, no head on your centipedes. Incorrect. Just being there. On Dash, question. We've just answered that. As long as it's clear. You don't need to make it look exactly. It could be some circles and some lines. That's absolutely fine. Pardon? Oh, you don't need to go over the top. As long as it looks like circles and lines, it's absolutely fine. Right. Deadline, just to recap, is Wednesday, end of lesson. What you're going to do now, some people are already into drawing millipedes. Your first step is to plan what you're going to have done in each of the lessons. Yeah? Yes. Actually, no, unless it says no, the body segment is not included in the first one. But in the millipedes, centipedes, it says the head is not included, right?
Oh, that's not good.
It says there, read it thoroughly. Read the whole thing. Do your planning sheet. What are you planning to do each lesson? And I do want to see it ticked off. So on Monday, I'll look at your sheets, bring them with you. I will see ticks happening. All right? Okay. Video's there.